Welcome to Fintech Chatter News, presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. Follow us on your favorite podcast player or Fintech Chatter TV on YouTube.
I'm Dexter Cousins, and we've got an absolutely jam-packed fintech news for you. It's Intersekt tomorrow, and the excitement is building for Australia's premier fintech event. I'll be chatting to Fintech Australia's Rayan Dalmida to give us a rundown on what to expect. If you can't make it to Intersekt, I'll be covering events and bringing you daily shows. So if you're new to Fintech Chatter, make sure to follow us on your favourite podcast player. In this special show, I bring an exclusive glimpse into the Fintech Delegation, organised by the UK Department of International Trade. We've worked closely with UK DIT as part of the Aus UK Fintech Bridge. The programme has supported over 100 fintechs to expand internationally. And I was lucky enough to be invited to day one of the delegation to share insights and connect with some of the UK's up-and-coming fintech companies. We'll hear from UK DIT on the new trade agreement, Fintech North give us an insight on opportunities outside of London, and Currency Cloud talk about their Australian launch. I've also got a host of interviews from some of the UK delegates, including fintechs focused on ESG, AI, payments and business lending. But let's kick off the show with an insight into this week's Intersekt. Rayan.
Hey Dexter, thanks for having me.
Is this your Fintech Chatter debut?
It is, yes.
Wow.
I've worked for the longest time behind the scenes and connecting you, and you've been introducing us to different fintechs, so it's good to be on the other side.
Yeah, well, I have to say, not only are you looking very calm and composed for your Fintech Chatter debut, but we are also 24 hours out from Intersekt, Australia's biggest, most prestigious, best fintech event.
Probably because of the lack of sleep. And also, you're a calm ambiance person, so definitely keeps the room calm here.
Well, I'm hiding my own excitement, right? Last year, I likened Intersekt to Coachella. So I'm not going to go that far because I don't want to end up in the Batuta advocate again. But it certainly is a time where the industry comes together, and having seen the event evolve over the last 4 or 5 years, it's great. But I'll let you tell everybody about what we can expect this year.
Yeah, it's been amazing just seeing the level of interest from the community on the whole. Not just from the fintechs, but from the financial institutes, from the regulators, from government as well. A little unfortunate that it's sitting for the federal government, so we wouldn't have any of the key ministers there, but Minister Stephen Jones will be speaking, sending a recording there for the audience. But overall, we underestimated the demand for the conference this year. We're expecting more than 900 attendees.
Wow.
And that's just going to be full on with so much happening, so many other smaller networking events, a lot happening behind the scenes in the evenings of the conference. So there's so much so many places to participate in and access. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun indeed. And 900 people, that would explain why I've had so many people reach out to me over the last few days asking if I can get them a ticket.
I know, tell them I'm so sorry. They could probably watch it online, but otherwise it's just impossible, and making me really nervous that we can accommodate and ensure the quality and the expectations from the event is still met, although we're already overbooked. So I don't want to be able to extend it to any more people. But yes, it's a little unfortunate we couldn't accommodate them all. Next year, for sure, we'll pick up much larger event space just because we know the level of demand for this conference now.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, if I go back, I think 2018 was my first Intersekt. Maybe, a couple hundred people there. And then 2019, I think we got up to 400-500. Yeah. Last year was just crazy. I remember just walking in, just thinking, like previous years, it was kind of, the mornings were always kind of a little sedate, slower, calm, people kind of rocking up. I arrived at 9:30 a.m. thinking, I'll just kind of grab a coffee, chat to people. The place was packed. The energy was through the roof, and it was like that for 2 days. Literally could not get more than, say, a minute with any individual before somebody else would come up and want to talk.
Sure.
You expecting a similar kind of vibe this year? You're sensing that level of excitement? Because it's a bit of a difficult time, right? We've got, businesses are clearly struggling. Funding's down. We've heard of redundancies. It's not, there was that kind of pent up, we'd been in lockdowns. We had to miss a year. Yeah. Are you still sensing there's that level of excitement?
So two parts here. First is what happened last year. We were really fortunate to even have the conference. It was just bang between those two lockdowns, and we just got really lucky there. And that was also shown with the level of excitement from the conference and from our attendees to participate in something and meet in person. It was interesting to come across so many people who were meeting their own teammates for the first time at the conference just because they were stuck in different cities through the entire lockdown. So that was exciting to see last year. And this year is... Yes, we understand that there are new challenges in the industry. Access to capital is becoming a challenge. Talent and redundancies, as you mentioned, is a huge issue currently. And we want to be able to support our members and our community in whatever way possible. I remember early days of the lockdown, we built that system where we can help fintechs, connect with those, because there were some fintechs that were looking to hire and others that were making people redundant. And we were able to build that system to connect them. We want to continue supporting them in whatever way possible. Fintechs understand the value of these conferences now and understand the value of being in that one area where they find those opportunities to really connect and collaborate and find those partnership opportunities. Yeah. So many success stories I've heard of in the past few days. I remember SwiftX reaching out and mentioning that they met with Superhero for the first time at our conference. Wow. And that's where the whole convergence of ideas and thoughts and values happened. And that's when they realized that there is possibly a direction they can take together. Assurance Lab was another one that mentioned how they met at Intersekt and got to partner with AdaTree and I think DNX Solutions and multiple other partners to build out CDR in a box. So many of these success stories from last year, and I'm just so excited to know what we can hear from this year.
Yeah. Look, I think the other thing that's a stark difference for me is the involvement of the incumbents. It's no longer kind of us and them. Yeah. They are very much becoming a key part of the ecosystem. It's
amazing to see that happen. It was expected to happen in any case. It's both a global trend as well as locally. There's a lot of interest from the incumbents, from the larger institutions to participate, to learn from, to see those opportunities to collaborate. And we have been encouraging that. So it's also great to see it happen now into its fullest fruition. And I'm quite excited to see and meet with these the delegates from these institutions and see how we could further help build this opportunity to collaborate on this environment of collaboration.
Now, you've talked there about the business side, but there is, one of the things I love about Intersekt is the social side, particularly the drinks, the parties, the dinners. It's there's just a really special vibe there that I think you get a small group of people who are deeply passionate and deeply care about the space. What's the one event that you're really looking forward to this year?
This time, surprisingly, there is not just one event. So I think I'll have to shuttle between multiple events. Of course, the VIP dinner is an event which is in huge demand. We'll have one representative per organization of the larger organizations in Australia. And this time, we also have some of the banks and some of the VC firms participating in that VIP dinner. There is the international dinner separately happening where we have all the delegates, international delegates from the UK, Ireland, and Singapore coming in for that dinner. Then there is also industry dinners, the payments dinner, blockchain and crypto dinner, as well as an open finance themed dinner. So lots happening in the next 2 days. So Tuesday evening would be the industry dinners, Wednesday is the VIP and the international dinner, and Thursday's closing drinks. But in addition to that, a lot of our members in the community are organizing their own little meetups. I know Basic is organizing a meetup. Manuba is organizing another meetup, and plenty more that I probably am not even aware of. But you'll hear about it. And yeah, we'll have to probably shuttle between the two, and we'll probably bump into each other in multiple of these events.
Okay, so let's fast forward to Friday morning. You wake up. What has got you buzzing about this Intersekt being the best yet?
Probably Friday afternoon. I don't think I'll wake up in the morning. But I think just seeing the level of interest and excitement and satisfaction from participating in such an event, it's always great to see people come up to you towards the end. And I hope it's the same this year. People come up to you and thank you for being able to build something that really added genuine value to these organizations, both from a personal point of view as well as for the organization. And that's why we keep going. That's why we keep building this conference and seeing what more we can do to support the ecosystem and support our members.
It's been 3 years since the UK DIT last brought out a Fintech Delegation. I now talk to UK DIT's Louise Cantillon about the Oz UK Fintech Bridge and the new trade agreement. Louise, welcome to Fintech Chatter.
Thanks for having me.
I'm absolutely delighted to have you because the work of the UK DIT, we've been big supporters of you for the last 4 years. Really admired all of the great stuff that you've been doing. Rather than me blabbing on, probably it would be a good idea for you to tell everybody a little bit more about UK DIT, Oz UK Fintech Bridge, and some of the stuff that you've been doing.
Sure, no problem. Pleasure to. Well, I've been in this role for just over a year, and I was working for DIT in China before. And it's really interesting to see the different opportunities that different markets provide us with. And I think here in Australia for DIT, this is a great time. We've got a great sort of bilateral relationship with Australia and New Zealand. We've also signed free trade agreements, which we hope will be ratified over the next few months and be put in place. Because our main objective is to grow prosperity between our two countries. And I think fintech is a really brilliant space for this. And we've got a team that specialises in helping fintechs and tech startups, because we see it as a real growth area and an area that has real complementarity between the UK and Australia. I know you mentioned you've been working with us for 4 years, Dexter, so you will have been around when we set up the Fintech Bridge.
Yeah.
And the Fintech Bridge has been a platform to support British companies coming here to Australia and Australian companies entering the UK market. And it's been really successful with about 100 companies now having gone through that process.
And so when it comes to the FTA, Louise, what can people expect?
Well, there's a couple of things that I think will be really useful for service companies. And one thing that people talk to me about is the biggest challenge is people and mobility. So the free trade agreement will provide more flexibility around mobility of people between intercompany transfers. It will also increase the young person's working visa scheme up to the age of 35, which will give Australians the opportunity to work 3 years in the UK and British people 3 years here. So that's one thing. The other thing that we're really keen to focus on as well is mutual recognition of qualifications, which may be useful for the industry in terms of, financial professional qualifications. Yeah. So we'll hope to see that rolled out as well. There's also benefits around reduction in product tariffs. All product tariffs will go under the new free trade agreement. May not be so relevant to service companies, but will definitely be something.
We've got a delegation coming out from the UK this week for Intersekt. Can you tell us a little bit more about that delegation and kind of why they've come out to us?
Yeah, so really pleased to see this delegation here because it's the first fintech delegation we've had in 3 years due to borders and COVID and pandemic. So it's great that people are able to come in person and attend Intersekt in person. And we've worked with a number of people over for the programme. So with Invest New South Wales, with Global Victoria, with Fintech Australia, and Intersekt themselves. And there's a whole broad range of companies. I think we've got about 24 delegates on it, representing more than 10 UK companies, and they're right across the space, whether that's in, facilitating payments or looking at climate, finance, or also looking at illicit finance, as in money laundering. That's what I'm trying to say, money laundering. And we think there's great opportunities in Australia for them to collaborate. So this week is all about them getting to learn about the market. For some of them, it's their first time they've actually been to Australia, to learn about the market, to make those connections and understand how we can support them in terms of their growth of journey.
What's kind of the sense that you're getting as to the appetite from Aussie fintechs to go over to the UK, and how can you help Aussie fintechs do that?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question, because this year we had over 100 companies go from from Australia and New Zealand to London Tech Week, and a good proportion of them were fintech companies. And I think the really interesting thing about fintechs is that, the potential to scale up is huge. So if they're looking for a bigger market than there is in Australia, then we think the UK is the perfect choice for that. We have, the same sort of rules-based legal system. We've got the same language. We've sort of got the same humour. But we think it's a great platform for them. And we've got teams in the UK and here in Australia that can help fintechs identify, who potential partners are, looking at what the regulations are, and helping them on that growth journey. And ultimately, we want them to sort of look at London as their sort of European base.
Mm. Now, coming the other way so from the UK to Australia, of course, it's a smaller market. How do you kind of position Australia to make it attractive to UK fintechs to come out?
Well, I think that's an easy one as well, because I think that, traditionally, we've got a new leaf here with the free trade agreement and with us leaving Brexit, that traditionally maybe companies might have thought about Europe as one of their places for their sort of first export. What we've seen through the pandemic is there is huge making the most of that 24-hour offer as well to companies, that they could, potentially have somebody servicing here like 24 hours. And I think that we would encourage people to think about Australia and New Zealand, because quite often you don't think about it because it's just seen as, too far away. And I think with the world today, those sort of borders are getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that you spent some time in China as well.
Yeah.
Often, and certainly my belief, and I think it's a belief that's shared by many in the fintech ecosystem here in Australia, is potential attractions could be this gateway to Asia. Do you see that as being a kind of feasible kind of ambition for Australia?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I know that, for example, in Sydney, they're definitely trying to invest. New South Wales is definitely trying to pivot Sydney as an Asian headquarter for companies. And even since I've been here in the last year, I've definitely seen a move of just that sort of work from home that's changed things, where there's actually people doing global roles in British companies here and Australian companies from Sydney, but also that they're seeing Sydney as a place for APAC headquarters or APAC strategy. So 100% think that is possibility, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we get a lot of founders listening to this show, Louise.
Yeah.
If they're interested in expanding to the UK, how do they get in contact with UK DIT?
Well, do you do a link to the podcast?
Yeah, we'll have that. Will all be in the show notes.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So we'll provide you with the contact details of two of our great colleagues, Elisa and Steve, who you know very well. And please do get in touch with them. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter. Just drop us a line, whichever way is the easiest way for you.
I'm joined now by Nick Briscoe, and he's the country manager for Currency Cloud. Nick, welcome to Fintech Chatter.
Thanks very much for having me on, Dexter.
You've got a whole delegation from Currency Cloud coming. What are your plans of making them feel welcome and showing them the Aussie way of life?
I think we've already done that at the Opera Bar for drinks last night, and I think they were very impressed with the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge, of course. Very beautiful place to come and do business.
Yeah, it's an institution, right? It has to be the Opera Bar.
It's a cliche, but we love it.
Great to see another kind of UK fintech powerhouse converging on Australia. What was it about Australia that got Currency Cloud kind of excited and wanting to launch here?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of reasons. The first one is, it's a relatively small population. We're sort of 28 million people, about 0.3% of global population, but 1.6% of global GDP. It's a really highly financialized economy. We've sort of been through the delegation today and talking about the approach of a lot of the banking sector and our financial service. It's a digital first approach. And we also have a population that are very keen adopters of new technology. So it's a wonderful place to do business for all of those reasons for a fintech. And it was certainly part of the driving force behind Currency Cloud selecting Australia as the next jurisdiction to come into and next market to enter.
Now, it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about Currency Cloud. It's quite an interesting business model.
Yeah, it certainly is, and certainly a great success story coming out of the UK. So the short summary is that we provide banks, brokerages, and fintechs all of the tech stack and access to global financial markets to provide a cross-border payment solution and multi-currency wallet to their end customers quickly and easily. So we're taking a lot of the complexity out of a fintech, for example, to launch a multi-currency wallet and a cross-border payments product to be it their business customers or even their individual consumers. They can go to market really quickly without all of the complexities that we've built underneath the surface.
So I guess, if we'd have gone back, maybe say 4 years ago, would have been probably a very difficult market for Currency Cloud to enter just because there weren't that many fintechs.
Yeah.
This kind of view of now, the ecosystem itself is creating opportunities for other fintechs. How do you see that, from an Aussie perspective?
Couldn't agree with you more. It's very much self-sustaining in that regard. The development of the ecosystem here for, a lot of the sort of stone and chalk organizations, Fintech Australia, and just I think the general community has been exceptional. And I think you were mentioning on an earlier chat just how supportive individual fintechs have been of each other, and fostering that competitive landscape has been wonderful. And yes, the best way to describe it is self-sustaining. That makes it a great place to come and do business.
There's a bunch of UK fintechs who've come out as part of a delegation. What kind of fintechs do you think are going to be most successful here in Oz versus those that might struggle a bit?
That is a good question. I think we see a very well-developed ecosystem. So again, and it's again something that came up earlier today, is we need to see people that are an order of magnitude better than their competition in order for them to succeed and prosper in this market. I actually don't think there's any segments that are particularly underserved in Australia, and so that's where it's very clear that your product market fit needs to be exceptional. I would say. Your staff need to be exceptional, and you need to come out here with something unique in terms of the selling proposition to really be successful in the Aussie market.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now, it's exciting times. Official launch, I think, is it this week or was it last week? Currency Cloud?
Not so much the official launch. We have an installed base of customers here, but we did achieve our financial services license back in May.
Got you.
So we're using Intersekt as I wouldn't say a soft launch, but yeah.
This is just the party, right?
Exactly right. Look, it's an opportunity for us to come out, and as you said, we have quite a big delegation from Currency Cloud. It's an opportunity now that travel has opened up for all of our sales staff to come out and talk to new customers, and then for all of our account management team to talk to our current customers that we've perhaps just been doing via video conference for the last few years. Yeah.
Well, we get a lot of founders listening to the show. Who are your customers?
Yeah, as I said, it's banks, brokerages, and fintech specifically. In the fintech segment, we service a really broad range from very obviously payments institutions, e-commerce websites, to all sorts of different businesses where they're looking to embed a cross-border payment solution and potentially a multi-currency wallet as well for their customers. The key component, though, that Currency Cloud offers is, like I said, removing all of that complexity, allowing those fintechs to go to market quickly with a robust solution, and one that they also can have confidence in that has been powering many of the large neobanks and payments institutions throughout Europe and North America for a very long period of time.
Can you drop any names?
Revolut is obviously one of the most high-profile examples. Monza as well, all Currency Cloud customers. Probably the other thing that's key now for our customers is that in December 2021, Visa completed the acquisition of Currency Cloud, so we're now part of the Visa Inc. family. And, that gives us that sort of agility of a startup business, sitting behind with the balance sheet of Visa and the expertise and reach of Visa as well as a global network.
What are your plans for growth in this next 12 months?
First component is now that we have the licenses to actually start hiring staff on the ground. So we have our first job ad out now for a sales consultant just recently. And it's really starting to build out both what we call the new business, so the sales team, and then the account management teams here in Australia. Super important, again, to get that sort of on the ground and close support of our present customers, and then continue to build that customer base here in Australia.
And if there's people listening, I mean, what typically are the kind of qualities that you look for when you're hiring?
Passion, hunger, and intelligence and curiosity, definitely. I'm a big proponent of not necessarily hiring for experience, but hiring for personal traits. I think ultimately if you have smart, hungry people, they will learn what they need to learn and motivate themselves and be successful.
My upbringing in the north of England is probably one of the reasons why I'm so deeply passionate about fintech. Growing up there was an area of steep economic decline and massive disparity in wealth between London and the south and the north of England. So as someone who passionately believes that fintech is a force for good, it was great to catch up with Joe Roach from Fintech North to hear about what's happening outside of London in the fintech scene.
Fintech North is a ecosystem facilitator. It's really the focal point for fintech in the Northern Powerhouse in the north, in the north of England. So we engage a community of people who are interested in fintech, who are working in fintech across the north of England, and we've been doing that since 2016. Fintech in the UK has historically been quite London centric, like much of the UK economy, but that's despite the fact that there's really well advanced financial services and tech ecosystems all across the UK. Leeds and Manchester and Newcastle especially. So there's vibrant pockets of innovation popping up all across the UK. So that was why Fintech North started, really as a kind of acknowledgement of that, as a way of shining light on regional innovation. And
one of the reasons why I'm passionate about fintech is growing up in the northeast of England. See, there's very, very clear kind of almost like neglected towns and cities and whole kind of economies that were neglected by the government, whilst London was very much, this booming financial centre.
Just to pick up on the way that you phrased it, because it really resonated with me as a proud Northerner as well. Like you said, the Industrial Revolution, like it was born in the north, it was forged in the north.
It was literally the Silicon Valley of the industrial world.
Exactly, great analogy. Leeds, Manchester, Newcastle. We built the railways, we invented the trains, we invented built the ships. So, I think I see fintech very much as as the kind of, I guess, the coal of the next industrial revolution potentially, and I think the North can very much be continue to be at the coal face, if that makes sense. So I think fintech has a huge part to play in like leveling up the North. I think historically, like there's been issues really with funding. I think the funding landscape in the north of England compared to London, for example, is quite fragmented. In London, you've got that proximity. You can literally hop on the tube. You can go knock on a door and meet someone in a bar. As a bit of a criticism, I think a lot of the asset managers and the people managing these funds are reluctant to leave London and reluctant to leave the M25. Often reluctant to leave their offices. They're busy people, so that's why it's a lot easier if you're a London-based entrepreneur to get that funding. The funding ecosystem in Manchester is quite strong, to be fair. I think it's the second largest private equity hub in Europe after London, actually. So
cool.
Maybe less acutely felt over that side of the Pennines. But elsewhere in the north, you're often reliant on, angel investors, syndicates of angel investors. And they're doing great jobs. Organizations like North Invest do a fantastic job. Fund Her North is a sort of female entrepreneur focused sort of funding syndicate. They're doing some fantastic work as well. So there is support there. It's still a great place to start a business, but I'd say that the funding landscape in London is obviously it's kind of second to none, really.
So what's brought you out to Australia, and what's the interest in Australia from a Fintech North perspective?
Yeah, another good question. So I think I found this morning, obviously we're currently at the British Consulate and we've learned a lot about the Australian market, and I want to develop my own understanding of what that export journey looks like, so I can better, represent that and inform fintechs back home. The UK is a large market for fintech. I think it's the second largest market in the world. It has about 10% of market share. So it's easy for a lot of UK fintechs to sort of just sit there and think, yeah, we're doing good. We don't need to look elsewhere. And I just want to kind of help them have more of an exporting mindset. So that's kind of the first thing. I suppose secondly, as an organisation, we are entirely self-funded. We don't benefit from any central government funds, unlike a lot of the other hubs around the UK and other similar organisations around the world. So we rely entirely on the support of partners coming on board as sponsors or as annual partners to kind of fund our activity. So I suppose there's a secondary objective of potentially meeting new partners and sponsors. So, if anyone was interested in setting up in the north of England, we can put you in touch. There's loads of grant support available. Yeah. So just to give you like a sort of whistle-stop tour of kind of what's going on in the north, in the Liverpool City region, we see a real strength in wealth management propositions. And interestingly, as a fellow northerner, all of these specialisms relate quite strongly to the city's sort of previous industrial and sort of commercial heritage, which is interesting. Liverpool has long been a sort of centre of commerce and wealth management with its position as a port, during the Victorian era. Over in Greater Manchester, there's a real strength in payments and e-commerce. Manchester's the largest tech ecosystem and fintech ecosystem in the north. I've mentioned its funding ecosystem there. The universities are really active in fintech. All of them have courses and professors and research teams. It's home to some well-established fintechs like Adyen, big global payments firm. Klarna, everybody knows Klarna from Buy Now, Pay Later and their products there. But it's also home to some of fintech's rising stars. Mojo Mortgages are kind of revolutionizing the mortgage space. Nevo are providing secure messaging for financial services organizations. And Bank North, they were one of only, I think, 3 banks to be granted a license last year in the UK. So, yeah, some really interesting stuff going on there. In the Leeds City region, so just hopping over the Pennines, there's a real specialism in banking and lending. Leeds has long been a centre of finance and legals for well over 150 years, so that's reflected in its specialism. It's home to quite a few fintechs with purpose these days as well. Some interesting propositions like Curveblock, who are Leeds-based. They're using blockchain to democratize real estate investment and to build energy-positive homes. So that's kind of solving about 3 of the world's problems in one. Tread, who are with us on the trade mission this week, they're using open banking. They're a challenger. They're using open banking to provide a carbon footprint from purchases and helping customers offset that carbon as well. Other interesting developments, the Bank of England, the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, the British Infrastructure Bank and the Centre for Greening Finance and Investment have all either landed or are landing in the city. So it's a really exciting time for fintech in Leeds. The university and the council are really well supportive of fintech and of Fintech North as an organisation. And then just going up to the northeast, beautiful part of the country. There's a real sort of corridor of innovation between Newcastle and Durham. Yeah. You've already mentioned Atom Bank, who are based in Durham. They're one of the best known challenger banks in the world, pioneered the world's first digital mortgage. In Newcastle's home to Sage, who I think are the UK's second largest.
You're an old client of mine.
Yeah. Fantastic business. Well known for their accountancy software. Again, universities really active, lots of access to talent. Interesting specialism in payments emerging in Newcastle as well, probably down to the likes of companies such as Canny Payments, who are sort of pioneering B2B payments infrastructure, and another innovative company called Bottle Pay, who are pioneering crypto payments. So hopefully that gives you a flavour of what's going on.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, absolutely. And in terms of numbers, it's probably about 2,500 fintechs in the UK. The vast majority of those are in London, but you're probably looking at between 150 and 200 fintechs across the north. And like I say, Manchester's probably the biggest ecosystem, followed by the Leeds City region. And then, the northeast is kind of following closely behind that.
Well, we've got loads of founders listening to this show who are, subscribers. If they're interested in looking at the north of England, what's the best way for them to reach out to you, Joe?
Well, I'm really happy to kind of, have conversations and understand a little bit more about propositions. My email address is joe@fintechnorth.uk. So joe@fintechnorth, all one word, .uk.
With the UK being the undisputed leader in fintech, Australia's been playing catch up over this last 5 or 6 years, but the gap is getting a lot closer. So it was great to catch up with some of the UK's leading innovators who are part of the delegation to get their thoughts on Australia, why it's attractive to them, and also go through some of their own innovations. First up, here's Daniel Lane, CEO of QV Systems. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
And welcome to Australia. How have you found things so far?
It's been fantastic. I hear it was raining a lot before I arrived, but the sun's out now, which is helping to deal with the jet lag.
Good. Well, I think this is the first day that it hasn't actually rained in months. So,
I'm honoured.
Yeah, you're staying, right? You're not going back. Well, thanks very much for joining me. Really keen to find out a little bit more about QV Systems and what you guys do.
Yeah, sure. So we build a platform which is used for asset-backed lending. So automotive finance systems was my background many years ago now. And since building QV, we've diversified into asset finance, also known as equipment finance. That can be anything from laptops to industrial equipment to diggers, as well as doing commercial loans as well. So our software can cover all of those bases.
Cool. So what is it that's got you or has attracted you to Australia?
So funnily enough, I was talking to one of the other delegates earlier, and about 4 years ago, I was walking through Old Street Tube Station and got grabbed by some representative of Queensland who were running a scheme at the time to get UK businesses out there. We weren't really ready at that time to move over, but it certainly set the thought process in motion. A couple of the bigger, more established players in our niche made Australia their first overseas expansion after the UK. So it seems like a natural fit. Obviously, you've got the legal, regulatory similarities, the language, common language. So this is a great opportunity for us to come out here, meet some people, see what the market's like, and see if we can make it work.
Awesome. And what was your kind of perception of Australia, I guess, prior to coming out? I know you've only had a day really to take things in, but were there any kind of preconceptions that you had that perhaps have not turned out to be true?
Ooh, what a great question. Well, I've never been here before. That's the first point, either leisure or work. So I didn't come with any preconceptions, really. I was delighted to be somewhere that I'd never been before when I got out of the train station from the airport. Surprised by how much it reminded me physically of America. The buildings, the trucks, all that kind of large-scale American flavour. But everybody's been super friendly. And yeah, I've got no doubt really that it's a place that we could do business in. As you say, only been here not even a full day yet, but already really like it.
Awesome. Now, you've got another, 4 or 5 days here. What are you hoping to get from that trip and this next kind of 4 or 5 days?
So I think for us, it's about making connections. We all know, those of us that have started businesses, that everything takes longer than you think. And under no illusion that we can just rock up here with our UK product and immediately start selling it. So for us, it's about starting to make those relationships now, get talking to potential customers, see what their problems are, tailor the product to this local market, and really start building the pipeline. As well as super excited to be going to Intersekt, meeting other fintechs, finding out what's going on technology-wise, and just treating it as a big learning experience.
Yeah. Now that space that you're in, I guess, one of the cool things about Australia, really entrepreneurial country, 2.4 million small businesses, 1.5 million sole traders. There's a kind of, and it's a market that is deeply underserved and a one that, whilst there are no low-hanging fruit, Certainly, it's an area that the banks just find too difficult to make profitable. What kind of and we've got so many different listeners to this show, but if you're looking to partners, those types of kind of relationships, what kind of people would you love to connect with at Intersekt or afterwards when they listen to this show?
Yeah, I mean, we would love to connect with anybody that's in that space already, whether they are a broker or a funder or a bank in their own right. But also, one of the big success stories we've had in the UK is with new start businesses, people who come into that space and, like you, recognize that the banks don't do a great job of it, but they've got capital to deploy, but they don't necessarily have the systems to do that easily. They don't want to build their own, and they can use our platform to enable them to get to market and to offer a more modern customer experience. I'm not an expert in the Australian B2B market at all, but certainly from the UK space, I can say that the B2B lending space in the UK is still way behind the B2C space in terms of CX, in terms of the journey. And that's what we're about, is trying to catch up with the B2C space and give the next generation of entrepreneurs who are not going to be happy with wet signatures. They're not going to be happy with the kind of lengthy processes that exist now. What can we do to enable them to create their businesses, to drive the economy forward? And so it's really exciting to hear that this is an entrepreneurial country.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, it's been great to catch up with you. Good luck on the rest of the trip. People are interested in connecting with you or want to find out more about QB Systems, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. It's Daniel Lane, Layne. So there's not many people with that spelling, so I'm pretty easy to find. And the website is just qv.systems.
Featurespace has already made a splash in Australia by winning FPOS as their first Australian client. Here's Charlie Rainbird to talk through their innovative AI approach to tackling financial crime. Charlie, welcome to Fintech Chatter.
Thank you very much. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Could you tell our listeners a little bit more about Featurespace?
Yeah, of course. Featurespace is a company founded from the University of Cambridge by a professor and his PhD student studying in the Department of Engineering. And together they coined a term called adaptive behavioral analytics, which what it does is, as a company, we fight fraud, we fight money laundering. And what it does is it turns the fight against fraud on its head. So instead of looking for things that we understand is signals of fraud and money laundering, we actually build behavioral profiles on every single individual to understand what good looks like and apply anomaly detection on top of that so that the bad behavior sticks out like a sore thumb. Wow,
that's super interesting. So what is it about Australia that has attracted Featurespace?
Yeah, of course. I mean, as a UK company, it's similar to Australia. So I think the way that business is done is relatively similar. So it's kind of a good fit for us. We also recently landed FPOS, who are now supplying the fraud score for the whole of the network, who have obviously got a lot of relationships with who would typically be our customers, the tier ones, the tier two banks, and the fintechs and people in the merchant space, the acquiring space, and they've got those relationships. And so having landed them as a customer, we wanted to make sure that we grabbed the momentum as it landed, as the news went out that we were supplying the fraud score for the whole network. We wanted to make sure that we had people on the ground when that news went live. Yeah. So myself and Sasha Slevik, who's the other Australian employee, we're here to basically pick up the pieces as those conversations start to happen, which they are doing, and hopefully land some banks.
Fantastic. So FPOS, huge client. Where do you go from here? Right? So, well, exactly. The pressure's on, mate.
No, it is. And FPOS, it's what would have been the pinnacle, right? Yeah. It's what we would have been chasing. We would have expected to be the final customer, the cream on top, right? But no, tier ones are huge because FPOS is good in the card space, but cards isn't all we do. We do electronic payments, we do application fraud, we do money laundering, as I said. So if we go after those tier ones, those tier twos, we can actually sell them the enterprise solution, which gives them a more performant platform, but also is a really good growth space for us. Yeah. It's not just one of our areas. We can actually hit all of our different sort of packages.
Now, it's obviously a competitive landscape, but it sounds like a fairly unique solution. How have you been going out to market and kind of getting discussions, and what kind of feedback have you been getting from the Aussie market?
Yeah, of course. I guess I'll take it a step back and talk about differentiators first. So differentiators being that we are sort of a machine learning pedigree. As I said, we're from the University of Cambridge, and we have got the best performing models in the world. We do head-to-heads very, very often, and we've not yet lost one globally. So I'd say the performance of our models is what stands us out. And every single percentage point that you can increase your performance on a model, or the decline rates of your efficacies of your models, is millions for some of these organizations which we're helping. So I think that as a differentiator really helps. I think the fact that we've got the FPOS link sort of changes what a normal go-to-market would look like. Normally you'd start smaller, win some of those smaller banks and hopefully topple up your way to the top. But because we've got FPOS, they are doing a lot of the introductions to these bigger banks for us. So we're sort of riding the FPOS wave at the moment. And around that, sort of supplementing it with events like Intersekt, like ACAMS, to sort of build up organic relationships.
Yeah. And Intersekt, it's only a day away now. What types of businesses and people are you hoping to connect with at the event?
Yeah, of course. So as I said, we've got relationships now with the big four at the moment. So it's to nurture those and to sort of expand those conversations we're having. So we're having a lot of conversations with the business guys, with the business users, with the fraud teams, with the money laundering and compliance teams. But we're now looking to sort of target that tech space within the banks, because we're a fintech, we're a tech first company. So getting to those IT guys, to the architects, to the guys that really drive that tech side of the business, fintech is a great place to meet those people, for sure. But also for us to actually target some of the smaller fintechs that we are more aligned to, I think, as our company. Someone that's, well, as I said, I think 3-4 years ago we were about 50 people. We're now 350 people, pushing 400. So businesses a similar size to us that we're looking to sort of grow with. I think Intersekt is a great place to meet them outside of your sort of typical tier 1 to tier 2 banks.
Yeah. If people want to reach out to you or get in touch, or they've listened to this and think, hey, we could potentially partner with Featurespace, what's the best way for them to reach out to you, Charlie?
Yeah, of course. LinkedIn, Charlie Rainbird. I work at Featurespace. You'll find me very, very easily. If not, it's charlie.rainbird@featurespace.com.
A few months back, I recorded a show with Brian Collins, where we talked about the next delta in fintech, which is really around supporting clean energy, agriculture, and the many social, economical problems that are ahead of us. ESG appears to have gained more traction in the UK than Australia, and I caught up with two innovative fintechs, Tread and Temello. First up, here's Eleanor Metcalf from Tread, talking about how they've taken the PFM tool and tailored it to tackle climate change. Eleanor, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm very good now. How's your trip to Australia been so far?
It's been great. Already met so many amazing people and already gained a lot of insight that you just can't get over desk research. So it's been great to be here.
Well, thanks for joining me. And look, it'd be cool if you could tell us a little bit more about Tread and what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So Tread is a UK-based consumer debit card that helps people fight climate change through their spending. So our main product is a debit card that plants trees as you spend. And then accompanying that, we have an app which lets you track your carbon footprint based on your spending. Based on what you buy, we calculate the carbon emissions of that so that over time you can track the impact that you're having. We'll give you personalized tips and advice on how to reduce your impact. And we also let you offset what you can't reduce. So basically one debit card and app that overall helps you reduce the impact that you're having on the planet and help fight climate change.
Cool. Now, sounds like a fantastic solution. What was it that got you excited about coming and exploring Australia?
Yeah, great question. So we're still fairly early days in our growth, I'd say, back home. We've got pretty ambitious growth targets, so naturally we're looking ahead to see how we can fuel that even more. One of the options, of course, is international expansion, so replicating the early growth that we've seen in the UK, taking it overseas. And there are a lot of similarities between the UK and Australian markets. I think the obvious ones that everyone talks about from a fintech perspective are things like regulation. A lot of the kind of digital banking behaviors are quite similar. But also for us as a sustainability-focused company, we also, of course, have to think about general consumer attitudes towards climate change. Do people take it seriously? Do they have spending behaviors and ethical behaviors generally that reflect their interest in the environment? And from what we can gather, at least from being over in the UK, people in Australia do take climate change seriously and are already starting to change their behaviour accordingly. And that means that for us as a market, it could be a really exciting and fruitful opportunity to expand into.
Yeah, well, we've just had a change of government, I think, predominantly because of the lack of action around climate change. And you'll meet a lot of people who've got solar here in Oz. And there aren't many other ways that, we probably feel a little bit helpless in actually being able to kind of have an impact outside of that.
Yeah, and that's what we're all about, right, is helping individuals take control of their impact and hopefully make changes that match their values and that they feel good about. We know that individuals alone can't solve climate change. We're not saying that, but it is important that if people want to, they can make a better impact with their money, and that's what we offer.
How have Tread been able to kind of keep that mission honest?
So I joined very early days at Tread. I was the first full-time employee. So our co-founders, Will and Pete, brought me on. We were pre-funding at that point. And I joined because I genuinely believed that it wasn't just talk. They really wanted to shake up the industry and do something different. And I wouldn't have stayed for the last 18 months or a bit longer if I hadn't seen that mission come through in the way that we build our product, in the way that we innovate, even in the way that we hire the team. We make sure that people we hire genuinely believe in what we're doing and will live those values in the work that they do day to day. So we've built our entire tech stack ourselves to make sure that when we say that we calculate our carbon footprint, you can really trust those calculations. We're not just throwing out a random number and ticking a box. We do a lot of work to make sure that the data we give people is accurate, for example, reflecting inflation, obviously a big problem at the moment. And I do think going forwards that ESG and sustainability will become more and more of a priority on the agenda worldwide, but certainly in the UK, the FCA over there is already taking steps to regulate the investment industry and make sure that greenwashing is less of a problem.
Yeah.
And it makes me really proud to know that at Tread we're at the forefront of that, driving that change rather than responding belatedly to regulation as and when it comes in.
Now, there's obviously, kind of been a huge push around things like buy now, pay later, loyalty programs associated with that as well.
Yeah.
It's do I really want another set of steak knives, or do I want to do something to help the planet?
Yeah.
Do you see a kind of opportunity for a product like this to kind of go on a trajectory that, say, buy now, pay later has gone on, or that we've seen some other kind of ideas in fintech really take off?
I mean, buy now, pay later is an interesting one because certainly in the UK anyway, a lot of people use that for fast fashion purchasing, which obviously goes pretty counter to the sort of sustainability ethics that we hold. For now, we are not going down a kind of highly commoditized product route in terms of cashback or BNPL or things like that. That being said, there is in the UK at least and globally a cost of living crisis increasingly that's being driven by high inflation rates, kind of static salaries. And one of the things we say a lot is that living sustainably and living cheaply don't have to be kind of contrary. In fact, often taking more sustainable choices like perhaps using less energy or reducing food waste are also things that can help improve your bottom line as an individual. I think perhaps falsely there's a narrative that living sustainably means you have to splash out loads of money on like hippie brands and this kind of aesthetic lifestyle that you're fed on Instagram, but actually at its core, reducing your impact means buying less stuff, being more careful with the stuff that you do buy. And so we like to think that we can marry those two concerns of trying to be more frugal and sensible with your money, but also having a more positive impact on the planet without having to invest a lot of money in cashback schemes or BNPL or kind of more complex products that can help save people money in different ways. The
FM tool it's kind of a novelty that doesn't really get the stickiness and people don't follow through with it. Maybe it's because they don't care that much. Whereas with what you guys have got and what you're building, somebody's deeply passionate about the environment. You're actually providing, the PFM tool works because the care factor is there to actually follow through with it and keep using it.
Exactly. We're not a short-term fix. Like, we are a provider for people who have fairly deeply held beliefs and want to live by them. And we hope that we can build long-lasting relationships with our customers, that they trust us enough to see that we are genuinely doing the right thing, not just talking the talk like a lot of providers out there. And we do believe that if we can build that trust, win people over, they'll stick with us because they see that what we are doing is genuinely different and is genuinely worthwhile.
Awesome. And I guess, if there's people listening who are interested in the solution that you've got and think they could be potential partners, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you, Eleanor?
Just to drop us an email. So my email is eleanor.metcalf@tread.earth.
And you're going to be at Intersekt this week as well?
I am indeed.
Yeah.
So really keen to meet some people there. I'll be wandering around,
Cool.
making some connections. So again, if anyone spots me, then I hope they come up and say hi.
Could you tell our listeners a little bit about Tomello and what you guys do?
Yeah, so Tomello is like very much kind of a new concept. It's based on the fact that if you invest, say, £100 into Tesla and you buy direct equity, you get a vote at a company AGM, and the issues that go through at those AGMs now, called shareholder proposals, are quite big social issues based on climate, human rights, CEO pay, etc. And the majority of investors these days invest through funds. And when you invest through a fund, you lose that right to vote. And then what you have is the majority of people voting are the fund managers themselves, the asset managers. And it means you have a very small cohort of people actually voting at company AGMs, which means corporate governance globally is restricted to a small number of firms. So what we're doing is providing the platform to allow both institutional and retail investors the ability to actually vote when they're invested in a fund, which we hope will kind of create shareholder democracy. And from a end user perspective, so from if you're, say, a super fund in Australia, for instance, by utilizing our platform, you give your clients access to vote on these shareholder proposals. So you're getting their opinion, they're having their voice expressed through their wealth, which is a very different way of looking at wealth than you have done previously, which is all about value up, value down. This is value up, value down, also impact, which is really crucial. It adds additional value, which we believe, particularly for super funds in Australia, will be a really nice value add and increase the engagement, which should help retirement and then issues around sort of decumulation.
So the super funds here in Australia, they're fairly powerful because of those voting rights that you mentioned. What is it that you think would kind of give the super funds the opportunity then to pass that on to the actual members of the funds? Do you think that's something that they're willing to do, or is it more kind of progressive fund managers that you think are looking at this?
So in the UK right now, the way the UK workplace market has brought it in, and we work with Legal & General, Fidelity, Aviva, and Nest, the big UK government-backed one. And they use it. They collect expressions of wish on the clients.
Right.
So when the customer or the member of the super fund or pension scheme goes onto the platform, they will say, I would like my fund manager to vote in favour or against. And what they do is they collect that data, we aggregate it for them, and they get an understanding about what their actual end investors, how they would like them to vote.
Got you.
So in the long term, we hope that people are willing to pass the vote on to the end investor or the institutional investor. We're not there right now. We class them as expressions of wish right now.
Right.
But it still helps with the engagement. It still gives the impact from the customer perspective. And it starts to introduce this kind of concept of stewardship, voting. And right now, you don't know what you don't know. Right?
Yeah.
And people don't know that if they're invested in what we found in the UK, if you're invested in a pension fund, people didn't even know their money found its way to Tesla, Meta, Twitter, etc. They just thought their money went into this financial system and money came out the other end. Like, they didn't understand that all you're doing is providing capital to big companies.
Yeah. Cool. So obviously Australia, the superannuation industry is huge, 3 trillion Aussie dollars. I think it's worth 10% of pretty much GDP. 10.5% goes into it every year. So I'm not going to ask you what's the opportunity that you see in Australia, because it seems like a stupid question. But what is it that you think is kind of attractive from your business, your culture, and the things that you're trying to do that makes Australia kind of an attractive place to come?
Yeah, I think it's been mentioned today about the regulatory landscape, very, very, very similar. The aspects around like the trustees and the pension schemes as well. So it's kind of that regulatory landscape. It's the similarities between how we've been successful in the UK and how we believe we can bring that into Australia. And also the emergence around and more focus around ESG and sustainability in Australian financial services as well. Whilst ours isn't an ESG tool, the votes that happen at these shareholder proposals are linked to environmental, social and governance issues.
Yeah.
So we do sometimes win business in ESG RFPs whilst not being an ESG solution. We class ourselves as a stewardship solution. But that's where we see the kind of potential in the space.
Cool. What are you hoping to get from this next 4 days?
We want to leave here and go, are we going to go into Australia? Like 100%.
Yeah.
Because I think what I'm hearing today is that you can't do this half-hearted, particularly with the time zone and particularly with how business is done over in Australia. You're already kind of thinking to yourself, you need to kind of jump in with 2 feet here if you're going to do it. And then it's an understanding about how we do that. And also from an Intersekt festival perspective, try and speak to as many different, like we super funds are a target, fund managers are a target, other fintechs that, involved in kind of wealth management are also a target. So just speak to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
It's a new concept. How do you feel about it? What do you think? And then get that kind of understanding back from them.
Yeah.
Is kind of the aims of the 4 days.
And if people want to get in touch with you, Matthew, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Either through LinkedIn. So name's Matthew Rankine, Rankine. And then smello.com is the website. But yeah, reach out. Happy to have a conversation. It's a new concept, and we're kind of happy to kind of have conversations about how they could potentially use the data, the APIs in different ways. Because we're still finding like different use cases for it at the moment.
One area of fintech where Australia has been ahead of the curve is payments. But with so much choice for merchants, how do they know which payment systems deliver the best ROI? Here's Robbie McDermott talking about the approach from CMSPI. Robbie, welcome to Fintech Chatter and welcome to Australia.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
Well, great to have you with us. For the benefit of our listeners, could you tell us maybe a little bit about what you guys do?
Yeah, so our official tagline is we're an independent payments consultancy. So we advise some of the world's largest retailers, most of the world's largest retailers, on how best to accept payments from customers. So it's 3 main areas of optimization. It is in maximizing the sales that you're driving through the payment methods that you accept, which I think previously was a concept that maybe wasn't understood widely or explored, but now is very much at the forefront with buy now, pay laters and new payment methods springing up everywhere all the time. You've got accepting those payment methods at an appropriate cost. Is it actually providing you, additional profit by accepting these payment methods? So that's a very important part of what we do. And then also making sure that the fraud that you're seeing through those, sales that you're trying to maximize isn't growing unbounded. You have to have something in place to check how that's growing alongside your sales. There will naturally be growth in fraud as you grow, but how can you make it a lower proportion of your sales as you go over time? So it's all about working towards that overall profit improvement. How can you address what you're doing in terms of payments acceptance to maximize your profit at the end of the day?
And what's your take on Australia when it comes to payments?
I think it's a really unique, interesting market that in some ways is very, very ahead of the curve, and particularly from the customer side, quick to adopt new ways of paying. But in some other ways is very behind the times. And I think particularly having 4 very strong, large banks for such a long period of dominance has meant that the kind of newer fintech players have had a chance to catch up and maybe surpass in certain areas, which now means that there is legitimate opportunity for retailers, fintechs, suppliers, whoever, to look outside of maybe traditional means and have partners that, maybe are still scaling, but actually have a product that can provide value over and above what's seen as standard or maybe days.
And typically, who would your customers be?
So we primarily work with our merchant client base. So we're supporting retailers really across any sector though. So hospitality, travel, B2C retail, e-commerce, anywhere there is a customer that's looking to pay a merchant, will help to optimize that particular flow. But obviously we have very strong partnerships with the supply chain that supports our merchant clients as well. Ultimately, we're not providing the solution to process the transactions. We rely on an ecosystem that is constantly evolving and changing and providing a really good value product. We're just maybe holding people to account on what they can and can't do and what sort of prices and performance need to come alongside that.
Got you. And in the way of partnerships, what types of businesses are you interested in connecting with on this trip?
So I think the most important thing for us as an arbiter of the landscape and a great filter for C-suite that we're advising is we need to understand what is out there across the whole landscape. And when there's a new solution or a solution that's been slightly tweaked and improved, it's absolutely vital that we know about that before our client does, so we can figure it out and figure out if it's going to be worthwhile them accepting. So for me, growing our partnerships in the space in terms of understanding, particularly of smaller fintech players, but even the larger ones and new innovations, new products that are on their roadmap scoping is so important when you're planning for payments, when changes can take anywhere from a week in some cases to 3 years of planning and prep from actual project go live. So that is a really important aspect of our business and something I'm looking to get out of the Intersekt conference and the rest of this week as well.
Awesome. And if anybody out there is listening, I'm sure they are, because we've got loads of founders in payments who listen to this show. If they're listening to this and they'd be interested in kind of partnering or finding out a bit more about you guys and what you do, what's the best way for them to reach out to you, Robbie?
Yeah, so if you can spell it right, then cmspi.com. On the website, we've got more information on there, or on LinkedIn, or we can meet at the Intersekt conference as well.
InVivo is a credit management platform enabling companies to automate accounts receivable. Here's their country manager, Ian Clark, on InVivo's plans for Australia.
Yeah, InVivo is a collections and credit risk platform. We provide software to predominantly business-to-business customer base. Been around for about the last 20 years. I've actually moved over to Australia, so I'm here feet on the ground, looking to see what I need to do to get the business expanded, really.
So when did you arrive in Oz?
I've been here January, so I've got over the jet lag. So
Got you.
I've been here for a few months, but predominantly been supporting the UK business as we transition, but now we've made the decision, thankfully, to kind of really start pushing the business out here.
And what is it about Australia that attracted InVivo?
So the product is built around automation and the whole concept of not just looking at FTE as a saving, but repurposing people's efforts in what they do on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of what we've seen as a success in the UK is around SMEs and global businesses that all get a chance to kind of improve their automated processes, but not necessarily at the cost of headcount reduction, but to repurpose those people into other areas, specifically like dispute management and kind of legal areas. What they're trying to do is to reduce the amount of debt they have that gets to the end of its life cycle and try and deal with it a lot sooner. So the whole thing around Australia is, from my own perspective of what I've seen against our competition, is that automation, that what we have, a state-driven engine that kind of makes all these decisions. There seems to be a need for that type of process here. So that's what I'm looking to bring is the automation and the real-time data-driven decisions that you get, rather than just things that happen overnight. So it's all about real-time data, real-time analytics.
Cool. What have you found have been, some of the kind of, the support that you've had there when you've been maintenance? Because I do a lot of the country manager role, and it's a difficult job.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I mean, today we've spoken to two kind of country managers, and that is where I think the thing the challenge I'm looking at now is what next? What are the steps, right? So what I want to get is the step to employ sales? Is the step to employ support?
Yeah.
Is it, what is that? How much kind of product knowledge do you need? And we touched on it earlier, regionally what's expected. So I think from being head of country, it's very much what is the level of expectation, what is the next step. So for me to be able to say that's what we're going to do, then we're going to do that. So again, just being in the same room with other people and people that have done it, they're all having they've all got the same headache.
Yeah.
What do we do next?
Yeah.
But having those guys on the panel earlier is very much, this is how you should potentially, approach it. So I think that we get more of that out the next couple of days. I think that's what everybody will take home from them is it the right place to go?
Yeah.
And if it is, how are we going to approach it?
Yeah. So we get a lot of people obviously listening to this show, both from a talent perspective and a potential client perspective. What kinds of companies are you now going to try and target that you've spent some time on the ground here?
So we've seen success building through a network of channel partners. So in the UK and in Europe specifically, we have direct clients that we've won and have seen great success with, specifically on UK based and also globally based. But also we're now starting to see a lot of traction around the channel partners, the invoice discounting people, invoice factoring, even the consultant firms. Very much those guys that want to deal with business transformation, financial transformation, and technology. They want to be able to understand how to implement a technology that's going to benefit their clients, but also then be able to consult and understand what happens next and take the data and help their client make informed decisions.
Probably listening to this show, so you'd best tell them where to go.
There you go. Well, contact me at ian@invivo.com, and I'd love to kind of explain a bit more about our journey.
Well, that wraps up today's show. Thanks for listening. Remember to hit follow so you can get access to all of our shows from Intersekt. If you're coming back to the show, thanks so much for your support. You can follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. And if you have any news you want to share, contact us at info@tier1people.com. Until the next episode, stay safe. Fintech Chatter is presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. We'll help you build a world-class fintech venture by connecting you to world-class talent. And you can find out more at tier1people.com.